So steering issues are currently plaguing my car. So now it's time to install a proper steering reservoir. This PSC reservoir was recommended by a few off-road guys and a few track guys, so I figured I'd try it out. I'd welded this 10AN fitting to this GM Type 2 steering pump. It's possible that my welding damaged it, but we'll see. I'll be mounting this reservoir with this clamp. I'll be adding a few welds here and there to get the angle set and see if this will work. The strut tower brace seems to be an okay place to mount this reservoir, so I welded up a few more braces. With a few more pieces added to the clamp, it seems pretty rigid. I think this is going to work. I drilled 2 holes in my Detroit Speed strut tower brace, a quick deburr. I did a test fit of the reservoir, trying to mount it as level as possible. It clears the hood, so that's good. Next up is to make this 10AN feed line. I used a 30-degree angle fitting with a straight fitting that I had laying around. A few turns and the fitting is tightened down. With a slight bend, this should fit okay. A quick cut, and the line is assembled. The other fitting is then tightened down. The third port is an extra port used for hydro boost, but because I don't have that, this is a good spot for a temperature sensor. Now I can see live steering temperatures when I'm on the racetrack. I used some spare 6AN push lock line that I had laying around, but later on I switched to an 8AN return line to reduce restrictions. The temp sensor is installed alongside the plug. The plug sensor wired is secured with some zip ties. I did a quick pressure test to check for any leaks. It looks like the top NPT fitting is leaking. Add some fresh Teflon tape, and the fitting is no longer leaking. This new reservoir weighs more than the factory plastic one, but oh well. I bolted the reservoir to the strut tower. The 10AN and the 6AN lines are then installed, followed by the high pressure 6AN line. A quick spray with some cleaner helps me spot any leaks later on. It seems to be holding pressure without any leaks. Redline fluid is added to the reservoir, and now it's time to purge. Did you know that fluid in a vacuum actually pulls the air out from the oil? It also pulls out any big bubbles inside the steering system, so it makes bleeding it extremely easy and very quick. I have a cheap vacuum pump and a canister to help with this bleeding procedure. A midi vac can also do the same thing, it's just a little bit slower. Get the front tires off the ground, then do 25 turns lock to lock in a slow-ish manner. The fluid level is then rechecked and refilled. So this PSC valve only holds about half a PSI after about 30 minutes. The steering reservoir really needs 1 to 2 PSI to avoid cavitation on startup. This radial dynamics pressure valve is better at holding pressure. It breaks at around 5 PSI, but it actually holds pressure even hours and hours later. I installed it underneath my Detroit Speed strut brace with a single zip tie. The blue end of this valve faces away from the reservoir. The line is then routed underneath my airbox. There's a chance that a little bit of steering fluid can get past the valve, so it's best to have the oil flow somewhere where there's nothing to catch fire. A few hours later, and this radial dynamics valve is still holding pressure. That's what I wanted to see. I installed a new filter and new fluid after running the car for a little bit. I figured getting any metal out of the system would be beneficial after my other reservoir failed pretty catastrophically. So this was my first attempt at a remote steering reservoir. My idea was to make a mini copy of a dry sump tank. My factory steering reservoir leaked when temperatures got hot. It also puked out the cap all the time, and it did tend to suck in air under high G turns. The idea of this tank was to cool the fluid, keep it from aerating, and avoid leaks. But my knowledge on hydraulic systems was lacking, and the result was I killed a $700 steering pump. Ouch. I didn't know this at the time, but a steering reservoir has to have some form of pressure in it. If it doesn't, the pump cavitates, which in my case, it was cavitating a lot. When cavitation occurs, a bunch of air flows through the system and the lubrication that the steering fluid provides is greatly reduced. That and the steering system doesn't work properly. Another issue was that the pickup tube was slightly below the steering pump. This wasn't good to keep a steady flow of fluid to the pump itself. Yet another issue was this design didn't circulate fluid very evenly. The fluid in the center was actually a lot cleaner than the outside because the outside fluid in the canister simply wasn't being recirculated. Also, having the outlet port at the top of the tank be not submerged in fluid itself, it was adding air bubbles to the system as it fell down, which is obviously not good. However, this reservoir did cool the fluid extremely well. I was actually genuinely surprised to see about a 40-degree difference in steering temperatures with this reservoir. I guess that's the only upside to this. Unfortunately, it costs about $200 in material and a lot of my time, but I guess I got to improve my aluminum welding skills. So as a result, I had to send my steering pump back to turn 1 for a rebuild. I think the combination of this faulty reservoir and the heat from the welding damaged some of the bypass seals on the pump. That's my fault. So now to the pros and cons of this PSC reservoir. Starting out with the pros, the first benefit are much lower running temperatures. The fluid is simply way cooler. It doesn't leak at all. It has an area to install a temp sensor, which is nice. It has a larger feed and return line, and has a very cool integrated filter. And now for the cons. it's a little bit difficult to package this reservoir into an engine bay. It's also not cheap. After you buy the reservoir, the pressure valve, the lines, and everything else, it adds up. So this is the worn out Turn 1 steering pump. It really doesn't look damaged to my eyes, but I'm also not a steering expert. The Turn 1 guy said that all of the tolerances were out of spec, so I'm just going to have to trust them on that. I did my first track day, and after 3 20-minute sessions, steering temperatures stayed around 250 degrees and then never budged. So I will consider this problem solved. Now I gotta fix my terrible brakes, but that's for a different video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I haven't been releasing a ton of videos lately, I'm just kinda busy.